When the phone rang, I was 3 minutes away from locking the front door and heading to the airport. The suitcase I'd packed for the cruise sat patiently at my feet, navy blue, hard-shelled, and glimmering under the hallway light like it already knew paradise waited just beyond TSA. I'd triple-checked my itinerary, confirmed my ticket, and scheduled the rideshare to the port. After a year of working overtime, surviving layoffs, and paying off someone else's student loan debt, don't ask, the ocean was calling, and for once in my life, I intended to answer it. But the ringing of my phone, urgent, relentless, sliced through my calm like a serrated knife. "Hello," I answered, my voice caught between excitement and confusion. "Mason," my mother said, breathless and trembling. "Grandma collapsed. We're rushing her to the hospital. You need to come now. Forget the cruise. She needs you." The suitcase hit the floor with a thud that echoed across the tiles. "Wait. What? What happened? Is she awake? Did the ambulance come?" "They're taking her now," she said, voice barely holding. "We'll cancel your cruise spot. Don't worry about anything else. Just come, please." I didn't hesitate. Not for 1 second. That's the thing about being the one who always shows up. You don't question it, not when it matters. I dumped my suitcase out, tossed my cruise documents onto the kitchen table like they were trash, and grabbed a hoodie, my keys, and the knot of dread already forming in my gut. I drove faster than I should have, running on reflex and fear, my fingers tightening around the steering wheel with every mile toward the hospital. Except when I got there, I knew something was wrong the second I stepped through the sliding glass doors. "Name of the patient?" the triage nurse asked without looking up. "Margaret Callahan," I said quickly. "My grandmother. She was brought in about 20 minutes ago." She typed. Her brow furrowed. She typed again. Her eyes met mine. "There's no one by that name checked in, and no ambulance under that call." "Are you sure it was this hospital?" "Yes," I said, panic rising. "My mother said they were bringing her here." "Please check again." Another nurse came over. They pulled up every nearby location, every ER, every possible alternative. No one had admitted a Margaret Callahan tonight. Not here. Not anywhere. I stepped outside. I called my mother. No answer. I called my sister. Voicemail. I called them again and again until the skin on my thumb stung from pressing redial. I left voicemails, texts, voice memos. I refreshed their locations, stared at the empty gray circles blinking back from the Family Share app. Hours passed. No word. No call. No explanation. At midnight, I sat in my car in the parking lot of an empty hospital, watching my breath fog the glass, wondering if I'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe they'd taken her somewhere else. Maybe they were just in chaos. Maybe. My phone lit up. Instagram. A new post from my sister. There they were, smiling, sun-drenched, glowing under palm trees. "Best family vacation ever," the caption read. "Just us and no drama." The photo wasn't old. I recognized the swimsuit. The one she'd just bought. I recognized the necklace she borrowed from me. I recognized my father's ridiculous flamingo shirt and my mother's cruise hat, the one she swore was for the memories. And there they all were. Everyone. Everyone but me. My blood turned to ice. My hands shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I zoomed in on the image. Laughed. Laughed so hard it cracked in my throat like glass. No drama. Just us. My grandmother wasn't in a hospital bed. She was poolside in a visor, sipping what looked suspiciously like a frozen daiquiri. They'd lied. All of them. They wanted a vacation without me, and they couldn't even be honest about it. They manufactured a crisis so I'd walk away without a fight. So they could keep their happy little cruise, take their happy little pictures, and not have to deal with the one person in the family who always kept receipts. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger was too clean, too bright. What I felt was deeper, heavier. Something slow and sour that simmered under the surface. A weight that sank into my ribs like teeth. I didn't go home that night. I drove. I drove until I hit the coast and parked in front of the water I'd been meant to sail across, a ghost on a vacation that should have been mine. The tide was high. The air smelled like salt and regret. I stared into the dark and made a decision. They thought this was over. They thought cutting me out would be easy. They forgot who they raised. 3 days later, I walked into the family house unannounced. My key still worked. No one had bothered to change the locks. The living room looked exactly like it always did. That was the thing about this family. They believed in stability. Predictability. In keeping things just messy enough to be real, but never so chaotic it couldn't be cleaned up before guests arrived. Picture frames lined the mantel, birthdays, weddings, graduations. I wasn't in most of them. A fact I'd stopped noticing until I started paying attention. I walked to the hallway closet, pulled out the photo albums. The ones Mom kept in descending order by year, each labeled with Sharpie in her neat, slanted print. I flipped through them, page after page. My absence was surgical. Whole events where I'd been the one driving people home, paying for cake, helping in the kitchen, and yet, when it came time to frame the memory, I was always just out of shot. The erasure hadn't started this week. It had always been there. I put the album back. Then I opened my bag and began. The first thing I did was call the bank. The account I shared with my mother for emergency use still had my name on it. I'd set it up years ago when Dad's hours got cut and the mortgage payment bounced. I had the passwords, the statements, the transfers. Over the years, I'd poured nearly $28,000 into that account: bailouts, car repairs, forgotten medical bills, Christmas when the lights were about to get shut off. They drained that account right before the cruise. Every last cent. I froze it. I called the utility company next. Turns out I was still the primary on the electric bill, left over from when my father defaulted, and I stepped in to fix it. I gave the rep my name, my ID, my account number. "I'm moving out of state," I said. "Terminate service by end of day." Check. Then I filed a report with my employer. My sister, Sarah, had used my employee discount, again, without permission. She always framed it as family helping family. But corporate policies are very clear. Unauthorized use was grounds for investigation. Checkmate. I waited. I didn't text. I didn't call. I let the silence do its work. Day 4, the power went out. Day 5, the bank called my mother about the frozen funds. Day 6, my father's gym membership was flagged for fraudulent activity after he tried to charge it to my card. By day 7, they were back from the cruise. And they were furious. My sister called first. I let it go to voicemail. "You're being insane," she hissed. "We just needed a break. You're always so intense. This is your fault." Then my mother. "Mason, we need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. It was one vacation. Don't ruin the family over it." My father didn't call. He sent a group text. "This kind of behavior is unacceptable. You owe us a conversation." I sent back a photo. It was of me, smiling, on a beach, somewhere sunnier than wherever they had gone. Just me, I captioned it. And no drama. Because revenge doesn't always come in flames and fury. Sometimes it arrives quietly, methodically, one calculated move at a time. And this? This was just the beginning. I used to believe betrayal was a single act, a blade in the back, sharp and fast, followed by the sweet mercy of separation. What I learned in the week that followed was far darker than anything I'd prepared for. This wasn't a wound. This was rot. This was poison in the water supply. This was a family not broken, but built on illusion. And the illusion was mine to tear down. It started with the silence. Not the initial, deflective kind, the one you get when people are buying time to reframe the narrative. No, this was the kind of silence that stretches like a held breath, waiting for your next move, hoping it won't land on their doorstep. My phone remained dark for 3 more days. No apology. No justification. Just the slow and certain realization that their decision hadn't come from impulse, it had come from practice. From comfort. From habit. I had been cut out with the same casual efficiency one uses to remove a loose thread. Except I wasn't a thread. I was the damn needle. So I started digging. It began with Grandma. The woman they said was dying. The woman they swore was in a hospital bed, barely holding on, summoning me with her last coherent breath. My grandmother, the soft-spoken matriarch who taught me how to balance a checkbook and how to lie with a smile. My grandmother, who'd made me tea when I had strep throat, but also covered for my cousin when he totaled my car and vanished for 3 days. She was an odd blend of warmth and weaponry, and I wanted to believe she hadn't been part of this. I wanted to believe she was simply used as a pawn. But when I called every hospital in the Tri-County area and received nothing but polite confusion and an apology for my concern, I knew something was off. I checked her social media, which she only used to post blurry photos of hummingbirds and passive-aggressive memes about forgiveness. Nothing. Then, through the magic of digital breadcrumbs and poor privacy settings, I found her. Tagged. Not in a medical wing. Not in a hospice bed. In Florida. On a chaise lounge. Holding a glass of lemonade, smiling beside a sign that read, "Welcome to Sunny Palms Senior Living. Weekly luau." It felt like ice water had been poured down the center of my chest. She wasn't dying. She wasn't even sick. She was tanning. The rage I'd barely restrained for days erupted not in flames, but in clarity. This wasn't just about being left behind. This wasn't about one lie or one cruel manipulation. This was bigger. This was a structure. A mechanism. A machine that had been grinding beneath me for years, taking parts of me and spitting out nothing in return. And it was time to break the gears. But I needed help. I needed someone who understood how to follow digital trails that didn't want to be found, someone who didn't flinch at offshore accounts or shell corporations or the kind of legal sludge you don't touch unless you've got gloves made of federal clearance. So I called someone I hadn't spoken to in nearly 6 years. Elena. Back in college, Elena was the girl who once rewrote a university grading system in her spare time, just to see if she could. She wore sarcasm like a second skin and had an aversion to sleep that made Red Bull practically beg for mercy. We'd been close once. Very close. Until life took her toward law enforcement and me toward survival. But this? This was reason enough to break the silence. "Jesus Christ, Mason," she said after 5 minutes of listening. "That's not just messed up. That's orchestrated. Calculated. You sure it wasn't just a personal snub?" "They faked a medical emergency," I replied flatly, "and drained a shared bank account to fund it. This wasn't a snub. This was a con." There was a pause. The kind that clicks into place when someone goes from humoring you to taking you seriously. "Okay," she said. "I'll bite. But if I do this, I need something in return." "I'm not asking for a favor," I said. "I want to burn this to the ground." "Good," she replied. "Because what you're describing, that's not just morally disgusting. That's potentially criminal. Give me names. Give me accounts. Let's see what worms crawl out when we lift this rock." It took 48 hours for Elena to find the first crack. A charitable travel fund, listed under Grandma's full name, Margaret Elaine Callahan, had been established 3 months ago. It was branded as a nonprofit dedicated to providing end-of-life travel and enrichment experiences to seniors with terminal diagnoses. The website was simple, elegant, and believable. A stock photo of a silver-haired woman gazing wistfully at the sea. A donation portal. Testimonials that read like they'd been written by AI. All of it screamed legitimacy. Until you looked closer. The fund had processed over $72,000 in donations in the past 2 months, and every single cent had been rerouted through 3 separate holding accounts, 2 in the Cayman Islands, and 1 linked directly to a business registered under my father's name. A business I had never heard of. "Looks like he incorporated something called Maritime Memories LLC," Elena said, sending me the files. The paper trail's thin, but the payments line up with the cruise itinerary. If I had to guess, this entire trip was funded through stolen sympathy. How many people donated? I asked, bile rising in my throat. At least 40, she said. Mostly strangers. Crowdfunding, community posts, church circles. The story they told was convincing. Beloved grandmother, terminally ill, bucket list final voyage with her family. They even had a GoFundMe. I opened the link and stared at the photo. It was Grandma, holding my hand. The caption read, "Help Margaret spend her final days surrounded by family and love. Every donation helps send her on her final journey." My mouth went dry. The story was a lie. The photo was real. Taken 2 years ago at a family barbecue. They had cropped out the part where I was cutting up her steak because she'd forgotten her dentures. They had weaponized that moment. My moment. My hand. I don't know how long I sat there before Elena's voice cut through the fog. "I can help you," she said. "But I need you to get me more. I need access to personal devices, email accounts, statements, anything that proves who was involved, how far this goes. Because what I see now, that's a start. But if you want a case, if you want this to stick, you need proof." And Mason? Yeah, be careful. Because people don't build lies this intricate unless they have something to protect. And they don't protect it with kindness. I started with Sarah. My sister had never been good with passwords. She used birthdays, pet names, and once, infamously, password 123 because she claimed no one would expect something so obvious. I hadn't spoken to her since the voicemail she left calling me emotionally unstable, but that didn't stop me from knowing her email address. I guessed the password in 3 tries. Inside, I found receipts, confirmations, forwarded itinerary updates, and PayPal statements. But what caught my eye was the spreadsheet, titled Family Fund, Do Not Share. I opened it, and everything clicked into place. Each family member had a designated amount beside their name. Sarah, $2,500. Seth, $1,800. Mom, $3,000. Even Grandma, $500. They'd allocated the money like it was Monopoly cash. And beside my name? Nothing. No entry. No contribution. No share. Like I didn't exist. I downloaded the file and sent it to Elena. Her reply came within minutes. "Jesus. This is perfect. This spreadsheet plus the offshore accounts? We've got fraud. Wire fraud. Possibly conspiracy. Keep going." So I did. I went to my father's office, which he still kept inside the house like a monument to authority. I waited until they were out, probably at brunch or spinning new lies about what a difficult child I'd become. The file cabinet was locked, but not the drawer behind the second panel on the bookshelf. A false back, just like the one he'd used for hiding scotch from Mom during Lent. Inside were business receipts, signed forms, an iPad he used for billing clients. I took it. I copied everything. Then I went to the attic. Not for evidence. For memories. I pulled out the old photo albums, the ones before the manipulation, before the silence, before the gradual deletion of my existence. I found a picture of me and Grandma, real and unfiltered. No fundraising, no filter, no crop. Just me. And the woman I thought I knew. She'd smiled at me through a lie. They all had. By the time I returned to Elena with a full drive of data, she was ready. "This is more than enough," she said. "We've got wire fraud, mail fraud, elder exploitation, if we can prove she was complicit. Maybe more. But Mason." "What?" "This goes federal." "I know. That means hearings, investigations, public records. People you love may go to prison." I looked her dead in the eye. They stopped being people I loved the moment they sold my grief for profit. There's a moment, just before the final curtain drops, when every actor on stage holds their breath not from nerves, but from precision. It's the moment that decides whether the audience gasps or laughs, whether the performance soars or falls flat. That's the moment I was living in, standing on the dock in my best summer dress, arms open, smile painted across my face like I'd spent the week meditating on healing and forgiveness instead of piecing together a federal case against my entire bloodline. They didn't recognize me at first. Not because I looked different, but because I was smiling. And smiles, in my family, were currency, only exchanged when something was wanted or something had been won. Sarah was the first to step off the cruise ship, dragging a floral suitcase behind her and balancing her designer sunglasses on top of her head like a tiara. Her eyes landed on me. She blinked, paused, then smiled, hesitant, rehearsed, uncertain of the script. "Mason," she said, drawing out the syllables like tasting a dish she wasn't sure she remembered ordering. "You're here." "I thought I'd surprise you," I replied, spreading my arms wide and pulling her into a hug she didn't see coming. "I missed you all so much." Behind her, Seth squinted toward me like I was a ghost that had chosen the worst possible moment to haunt him. My mother's jaw twitched. She tried to look pleased, but her grip on her handbag told a different story. My father? He just nodded once, measured and cold, like he was already scanning for the angle I might be playing. But none of them pulled away when I embraced them. None of them asked why the prodigal daughter, the one they'd left behind with a lie and a voicemail, had returned like nothing had happened. That's the thing about manipulators. They don't fear confrontation. They fear exposure. And right now, they were trying to decide whether to pretend everything was fine or prepare for war. "You didn't have to come all the way out here," my mother said with a brittle laugh. "But I wanted to," I replied sweetly. "Family is everything, right?" The black SUV that pulled up was sleek, polished, and just late enough to look unsuspicious. The driver, hired by Elena, dressed in a crisp black uniform with a fake rideshare badge, stepped out and began loading their bags like nothing in the world was unusual. "Where's your car?" my father asked, glancing around. "Oh," I said casually, "I figured we'd all go together. I even booked us a brunch to celebrate your return. Private venue. Big spread. Just us. I thought we could reconnect, you know? No drama, like Sarah said." Sarah flinched. My father squinted. But my mother clapped her hands once and chirped, "That sounds wonderful." They climbed in. The doors closed, and the clock began ticking. The venue wasn't a venue, not officially. Elena had a friend in Orlando with a warehouse she used for immersive theater events and private training simulations. She owed Elena a favor. That morning, the space had been transformed into something deceptively warm: wooden tables, white linens, pastel flower arrangements, and fresh pastries that filled the air with butter and trust. Hidden behind decorative sconces were cameras. Under the flower vases? Microphones. The waiter? A federal tech specialist named Joey who looked like he'd been born to carry croissants and federal warrants in equal measure. I arrived first, of course. Smoothed my dress. Tucked a strand of hair behind my ear like a daughter eager to make peace. Then I waited. They entered at 11:08 a.m. Sarah laughed nervously at the decor. Seth headed straight for the mimosa station. My mother sighed in admiration, touching a napkin like it had blessed her. My father said nothing, but his eyes never stopped moving. He scanned the room like a general assessing enemy territory. "This is nice," he said finally. "I just wanted one day," I replied, "where we could be honest with each other." That landed heavier than expected. Sarah shifted in her chair. My mother reached for a glass of water she hadn't realized was empty. My father raised an eyebrow and said nothing. The first 20 minutes were light. I kept my voice gentle, my questions casual. I asked about the cruise, the excursions, the dining packages. Sarah spoke most, painting a vivid picture of luxury and laughter, of family bonding and sunsets at sea. I asked how they paid for such a lavish trip. Seth snorted and said something about blessing in disguise and good karma. My mother laughed too loudly. But my father? He leaned back. And he smiled. That's when I knew he'd fall. "People underestimate sentimentality," he said, folding his hands like a preacher about to deliver a sermon. "You want money to move? You need emotion." slap a sad face on a charity post, and people will empty their wallets like it's penance. You mean the travel fund? I asked, eyes wide, tone syrupy sweet. The one for Grandma? That one, he said, chuckling. No one asks questions if it says, for Grandma. People love a sob story. The room froze. Not externally. Not visibly. The music played. The plates clinked. Seth was halfway through chewing an almond croissant. But inside that moment, inside the invisible fault line I'd been waiting to break, everything cracked. The double doors swung open. And in came the FBI. 4 agents. Suits. Badges. Authority. Please step away from the table, one of them said, voice clear, firm and echoing off the decorative molding like thunder. You are under federal investigation for wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit charitable fraud. Do not move. The scene unraveled instantly. Seth dropped his pastry. Sarah gasped so hard she nearly fell backward in her chair. My mother looked to my father with wide eyes, her mouth forming the word how over and over. But my father? He didn't flinch. He stood. He turned to me. And he said, "You did this." Yes, I replied, standing slowly, deliberately. I did. Because I'm not the daughter you forgot, I'm the storm you ignored. The agents moved fast. My mother was read her rights while sobbing into her napkin. Sarah screamed about betrayal. Seth tried to run, made it halfway to the back door before Agent Daniels tackled him without spilling his own coffee. And my father? He walked like a man being escorted to a meeting, not an arrest. Calm, composed, smiling faintly, like he still believed the world would bend back to his favor. But even he looked shaken when Agent Lou handed him the full warrant and said, "Your offshore accounts are no longer a secret. We have your spreadsheet. We have the testimonies. And we have the recordings. Anything you say from this moment forward will be documented and used in a federal court." I followed them outside, not to gloat, not to revel, but because I needed them to see me, really see me. The daughter who always paid the bills. The sister who stayed quiet for too long. The ghost who became a witness. As they were loaded into black vans, I stood at the curb and watched. Sarah sobbed. Seth shouted about lawyers. My mother whispered, "Mason, please," as if the words still held weight. But my father? He looked at me through the glass. And, for the first time in my life, I saw fear. Real fear. Not of me, but of everything I now represented. Accountability. Justice. Truth. As the vehicles pulled away, Elena appeared beside me, holding a clipboard and chewing gum like the world owed her nothing but efficiency. "You okay?" she asked, voice low. "No," I said, steady. "But I will be. Because this wasn't the end. This was the reckoning." There's a strange quiet that follows justice, not the clean kind you see in courtroom dramas where a gavel falls and someone weeps in the gallery, but the thick, echoing stillness of truth finally breaking the surface after years of being held under. That quiet filled my apartment the morning after the arrests. No birdsong. No coffee brewing. Just silence. Thick and earned. I hadn't slept. Not really. Just rested in segments, coming up for breath between memories, my sister's wide eyes when the agents appeared, my father's flickering smirk as the handcuffs clicked, my mother's whispered pleas through a linen napkin as if it could smother the consequences. That image stayed with me. Not because I took pleasure in it, but because I didn't. Justice, I learned, doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like shedding skin. Sometimes it feels like mourning people who are still breathing. By mid-morning, the world caught up. News alerts chimed across every device I owned. My name was redacted in most articles, at my request and through Elena's quiet maneuvering, but the headlines didn't need me to be front and center to burn. Florida family faked medical emergency to fund lavish cruise with charitable scam. Woman dying of cancer, spotted poolside as FBI launches fraud investigation. Granddaughter tips off authorities in shocking wire fraud case involving family charity hoax. I watched it all from the couch, phone in hand, face unreadable. Then my inbox pinged. One message. No subject line. No signature. Just this. Glad you didn't fall for it. I always knew you had the strength they feared. I read it twice. Then again. There was no doubt. It was from her. Grandma. Margaret Elaine Callahan, 78 years old, still sharp as lemon zest and 3 times as bitter when cornered. The woman they used as a shield, willing or not to sell a fantasy of tragedy that filled their pockets and paid for stateroom upgrades and all-you-can-drink wristbands. She was alive. Watching. And apparently, she'd never been fooled by them either. I wanted to ask her why she hadn't stopped them, why she hadn't warned me herself. But maybe she had. Maybe that photo they posted, her smiling, drink in hand, hadn't just been a taunt. Maybe it was a message. Maybe she'd known I'd see through it if I was given just enough rope. And maybe she also knew that if I did, there would be no mercy left to offer. The courthouse felt smaller than I expected. After everything, after the headlines and the agents and the sleepless nights, I thought it would feel grand, intimidating, cinematic. But it wasn't. It was gray, functional, buzzing with fluorescent lights and the low thrum of bureaucracy. But when I stepped through those doors, I walked taller than I ever had in my life. I wasn't here to observe. I wasn't even here to testify. I was here because Elena had pulled me aside 3 days earlier and said, "You should meet someone." The someone turned out to be Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Devereux, a woman who wore no jewelry and had the sharp, direct energy of a person who'd cross-examined 1,000 lies and still found ways to cut deeper. "I read your full report," she said, sliding a folder toward me. "You didn't just expose a fraud. You dissected it, tracked every wire, matched every transaction. You think like one of us." I blinked. "One of who?" "People who don't just see patterns," she said. "People who know how to unravel them." That's when the offer came. Not a badge, not a title, not a promise of glory, but something better. "Come work with us," she said. "Legal assistant. Federal Financial Crimes Unit. It's a start. It's a grind. But it's real. And you've already proven you're more than qualified." I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to say no, to step away, to breathe. But the rest of me, the part that sat in silence while my family siphoned off my savings, faked a medical crisis, and tried to sell my grief for vacation perks, knew I wasn't built for silence anymore. So I said yes. And now here I was, at the courthouse, wearing a new suit, carrying a badge that wasn't official but still came with weight. I sat at the front, beside Devereux, as the judge read the charges. My parents, my sister, Seth, each of them stood in separate booths, wrists cuffed, orange jumpsuits dull under the overhead lighting. Sarah sobbed. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. My father stood tall, unblinking, like he still believed the rules didn't apply. The charges were read out slowly. Wire fraud, bank fraud, conspiracy, charitable misrepresentation, identity theft, money laundering. Each count like a drumbeat. Each word a final nail. And when the judge denied bail, citing clear evidence of coordination, deception, and potential flight risk, I didn't flinch. Because I wasn't there for revenge. I was there for accountability. That night, Elena and I sat on her balcony, 2 glasses of whiskey between us and a breeze that smelled faintly of ozone and vindication. "You did good," she said, raising her glass. "You kept your head. You did the work. And you never lost the thread." I clinked my glass against hers, but said nothing for a moment. I was still somewhere in between. "They always made me feel like I was too sensitive," I said quietly. "Like every violation was my overreaction. Like I didn't know where the line was." Elena laughed dryly. "You knew. They just kept moving it." I nodded. "Let the truth settle. They thought I wouldn't fight back," I said. "Because you never had before." "Because I was too busy cleaning up their messes," I replied. Because I was the one who stayed quiet, who paid the bills, who fixed what they broke. Until they broke you, she said, more gently this time. I shook my head. No, they didn't break me. They revealed me. We sat in silence for a while, watching the lights from across the city blink on, one by one, like tiny declarations of resistance. Finally, Elena leaned back and smirked. You ever think about the cruise? I raised an eyebrow. The one you didn't take, she clarified. You could have been sipping cocktails in the sun. Instead, you were digging through spreadsheets in your hoodie with me. I laughed. Genuinely. For the first time in weeks. Yeah, I said. I think about it. And? I swirled the whiskey in my glass, stared out into the dark, and let the answer come without effort. I gave up the ocean for a hospital room, I said slowly, every syllable deliberate. What they didn't know. I also gave up mercy. Subscribe for more stories where betrayal meets justice and no lie stays buried.